requests. Do you want to start with the water department, or did you want to look at the balances first, Corey?
How did we organize it? I just lost my tab.
And
kind of
Chris
all in
Pratt is
one.
on. I did just promote him, so he's available to speak to those requests as well. So wouldn't, just so you know, he's available.
Give me 1 second to pull it up. Sorry, I lost my, when I was looking for Francine, I panically closed all the tabs. So I'm a bit blind for a second.
The agenda says water department balance review and capital requests. I think
All right,
we
thanks, Katie.
We lumped
Yeah.
it into one.
Yeah.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, so I will,
Michelle,
go ahead.
who can share?
I got you.
You can't open
I'll share.
OneDrive.
Are you going to email Corey?
No, I was going to share it.
Oh, on the screen? Okay.
Wait, well, Zoom just did an update, so I have to reauthorize stuff.
Do you want me to
So,
share?
yeah, if you don't mind, Michelle.
Okay, which document are we sharing first? The,
Start balance request XLS, so we can level set the water retained earnings balance, and then we can see Chris
Got
and
it.
just fly through that.
okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. So according to this, and so we're uncertified, but this is per our books, what we've got for the enterprise fund for retained earnings, the 1167.
That's that's how I read it.
Michelle, Chris, does that all add up to you guys? Is that what you guys?
Sorry, you talking to me?
Well, I'm just, we have just a balance. Our main concern was that with the enterprise funds, we just always like to double check that before we
Okay.
stamp it, that retained earnings will cover the request. Looks like you got plenty here, but just a verbal
Sure.
confirmation that that lines up with your accounting and that's what you're expecting or seeing in your books.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Chris Pratt. I am the chair of the Water Commission. I appreciate your time, and I do apologize for missing last night's meeting. I did not have it on my calendar, so I appreciate the flexibility for putting me on tonight. And so we have one article before town meeting with basically 3 requests from transfers from our retained earnings. Corey, I do have a different number based on the information I was given. So starting in column B,
Okay.
Yep.
I was informed last October, so October 23. October 23. I was informed that the certified retained earnings at the end of fiscal year 24 were 1,861,708. So slightly more than what you have there in column B.
Okay.
Okay.
Conceivably. Okay. And that's all right. And since that was last October, there's probably something in and out there. Okay.
Right. And then, so let me just make sure. You probably took our 2 town meeting articles. One was for a truck and one was to pay off some debt at the May town meeting, which would have totaled 89968 plus.
Yeah, you bought a utility truck. Yep.
Yeah, I have 569,184.
Okay.
Very close, within 1,000.
Yep.
All right, so I am showing our uncertified retained earnings balance at 1,292,524.
Okay.
So slightly more than what you have there in column G.
Okay.
Okay. We are requesting 3 transfers from our retained earnings, which total 535,000. Which would leave us a retained earnings balance of $757,524.
Michelle, can you pull this down? Please. And do you mind sharing the request document for Francine?
Chris, the one of the questions that I had, we had seen the request document with the three requests totaling the 535,000, one of which was Short Street. The requested transfer for Short Street in the memo plus what I see in the current warrant was $265,000. But in this document, actually, that Michelle is putting up, the amount that's being quoted from IARIA is 225. I don't know if it was just that's a preliminary quote and you had a slightly higher number because you wanted to cushion it in case the bidding came out higher than expected.
Correct. Yeah. So those are the two quotes we're working off for the two requests. We're carrying a 15% contingency on top of the quoted work.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you'll see on both Cedar Street Loop and Short Street, slightly more than what IARIA is quoting for 15% contingency. So you never know what's going to happen. Maybe they hit
Yep.
ledge. Maybe there's a problem. On Short Street in particular, we will be installing a bypass system. So sometimes that causes additional costs, but we're not anticipating any, but just so we have it.
Gotcha. Yeah, because you can't come back to town meeting until May. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So Chris, were these two projects in your capital plan for like the 10-year plan?
Yes, they've been in the capital plan. Short Street is also on the paving plan. It needs to be paved very badly. We've gotten some resident complaints on that for a number of years, or Brian has really. And this main, it goes back to the 1910s. So it's due for replacement. So we're taking advantage of the timing, trying to do it now. And the Cedar Street Loop is more of a project of time and convenience and to take advantage of existing conditions. So the Cohasset Golf Club put in a new maintenance building, and we were able to negotiate an agreement with them to waive their connection fees for their new building in lieu of them installing a main through their woods on their property up to the line at the DPW garage, the DPW property. Which saves us considerable money, and we will now just need to tie in that main, which is at the DPW property line, through their parking lot and into the Cedar Street water main, which will create a loop. And loops in a water distribution system are always good for quality water, hydraulics, pressure, and that sort of thing. So this is something that's actually been discussed for, almost two decades from what I'm told. So we're happy to try to get this done.
And they're giving you some kind of an easement?
Yes, exactly. The easement has already been signed and recorded.
Okay.
And do we have something on the third request for the upgrades to chlorine gas?
So I don't have that quote. That is a quote that Jonathan at the water department did solicit from a vendor that we use.
Okay.
I don't have that quote. I will get that. I can circulate for you, but that's the estimated cost to upgrade all of our equipment in the chlorine gas room, which is part of the treatment process. Essentially the chlorine that's used to treat the water. It's aging equipment. It's a pretty significant safety issue at this point. So we want to try to expedite that.
And are we primarily pulling from Lily Pond because the pump station is? Are you using the pump station again, or is that still off?
The well field is still currently offline.
Okay, yeah. So Lily Pond is our primary source. Okay, great.
Correct. The only source.
Only source, right? Okay.
So that memo on the Cedar Street, I think that you had up, Michelle, it said at the bottom there were a number of things excluded from the description and presumably the dollar amount. is that 15% contingency, I think you said, supposed to cover those items? Yes, is this quote does not include engineering, plumbing, so on and so forth.
So no, we don't really anticipate, that's sort of boilerplate stuff that contractors put on their quotes. There is no engineering, plumbing, electric, landscaping, hardscaping, so they will backfill and patch the trench with asphalt. At some point later, Brian has said that he will pave that parking lot, but it will be backfilled and paved. And again, it's going through their parking lot, so there's really no landscaping, there's no electric, there's none of that. So that's just sort of boilerplate language.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions on these two?
I don't have anything on my end.
I'm good.
I'm too.
All right, so I will, I'll make a motion that we approve, we'll do them all three at once. We're moved to recommend the special town meeting, out of the Water Enterprise Fund, the replacement of the water main on Short Street for $260,000. The installation of new water main pipe on Cedar Street for $215,000. And the upgrades to chlorine gas equipment at Lily Pond Water Treatment Plant for $60,000.
So moved.
Second. I need a second for that one. I said I moved it, so Katie, if you want a
Oh,
second. Yeah,
A
yeah.
second, sorry.
Great. Okay, roll call vote. Chris,
Aye.
Francine,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Katie,
Katie Dugan, aye.
Corey,
Corey Evans, aye.
Susan Franklin, aye.
Mr. Pratt, thank you very much.
Chris,
Thank you
thanks
very
for
much.
taking the time to
Chris.
come on. Really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Michelle, can you bring back the stabilization fund sheet, please? Disappear. Thank you. So FY25 activity on this is collected so far in taxes because it's their credits, or their
Mhm.
debits, I guess it's a cash fund, but okay.
I assume that was interest.
That would make more sense.
I assume that it was interest that they're sort of showing the catch up on, because it has to be in some kind of investment account that has.
Correct. Yeah, we tracked that in the analysis form, Katie. I think you're onto something there. That makes more sense because otherwise the numbers don't.
Yeah. And I would assume that. Man, that's a boatload of interest for a couple months. I would think that that might just be interest. I don't know, like, I guess,
It could be cumulative from when the fund started.
yeah,
If it is interest, Michelle, can we change the header on the title on the top?
Sure.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense either. There's too much interest.
63.
Yeah, yeah, if it was interest, you'd probably be in the 7,000.
No, we don't have to change it now. Once we confirm what it is, so we know what it is.
I mean, if it was on the full $3 million balance, it might make sense, but it would be cumulative for. Anyway.
Yeah, we probably spent some of it. Michelle, do you
so-
want to just ping us back and get an answer on what that means? Okay. It's not hugely important, but
Yeah.
it's numbers.
One thing it did confirm for me, and maybe it was just my notes from last week when we were going through what we thought had been charged against the school stabilization fund. It did the $450,000 that was annual town meeting transfers out means that both the fire alarm and the Deer Hill tiling were both against the school fund. That's the only way you get to 450.
Right. Yep.
For some reason, I had a question mark against the Deer Hill tiling as to where that had gone. So we have those two coming out.
Correct. Yeah, I went through the town meeting too and got the same answer. So.
Yep. I did some. I just did a little math. Obviously, if you subtract out the 15,000 that we just previously approved for Osgood Roof, and then you subtract out the fire alarm at the 1.43, you have a little over 1.1 million as a balance. The select board last week did approve the continuation of the fund, and they actually approved it at a 2.5% increase, which is the maximum increase they could approve, which would add to the fund, I guess, at annual town meeting next year. Another
Yes.
1.537. So the way I was just thinking about it, so you have the 1.1 plus the escalated 1.5. We have a little over $2.6 million as the balance after the Osgood roof design and the fire alarm appropriation.
Yeah.
And I was just sort of trying to, in my mind, think, is that enough, or are we in a good place relative to what we know is coming next in terms of the Osgood roof? And I went back because we haven't gotten an answer from the schools around what the cost of the Osgood roof could be. I went back to the master plan, which is obviously old at this point, but at the time we had estimated Osgood at $1 million, Deer Hill at $1 million, and the middle and high school at 1.5 million. Those are obviously old numbers, so you use your inflator, but even if it doubled, we would still have
Okay.
we'd still have funds, and that doesn't take into account what the MASBA would potentially do in terms of funding. So I was just trying to do math in my head and say, okay, where are we? Are we in a good place? We obviously have a lot of things that we need to do, but in terms of the next up, which is Osgood, it felt decent.
And I want to kind of tee off that because there was a bunch of stuff, and just, I don't know if Katie, you're paying attention, but there were a few other kind of free radical projects that popped up with to come out of the fund for annual town meeting. And we, as a committee, were pretty tight about, we have to not spend this on anything comes along, but we have to focus on what the needs are that we've identified before we launched the fund. And the fact that we're sitting here today and, we can do the fire alarm system and then potentially even Osgood roof, I think speaks to how important it is that we continue that work. Because, again, if we're going to chunk out $250,000 or $500,000 every cycle for something that just pops up, we wouldn't be where we are in a good place, which is where we're going to be. So I'm just trying to remind us that kind of work, that kind of discipline is important. That way we can continue to be sure these funds are available. So if anyone made sense of
Yes,
that.
that's a very good point, Corey, because if we don't do it that way, we won't be able to do these large projects at all. So it takes the discipline.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and like our message to the schools is always, we want to do everything, but we also want to be sure we have the money to do things. And, that can be a nuanced conversation. But I think how we're doing it so far is proving to be successful.
Mhm.
Yeah, And I'll be very curious to sort of see what we hear back in terms of the pricing on the Osgood roof, because that will be very telling as to what Deer Hill might cost and the middle school, high school might cost, but I'm sure the numbers are bigger than what we had back in 2019 when we put together the master plan, because that's 6 years old now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than doubled, frankly. I don't know if Michelle, you've got a sensation on this. Do you have a betting pool in the office?
So I can revert back to the 10-year capital plan I think that we did last year, because I think Nick refined those numbers.
Oh.
So I think numbers in last year's 10-year capital plan reflect more of a true cost of the roofs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll pull that back up.
And they are made out of different materials too. So it's not gonna be exactly the same.
Really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes.
Thought they were all like rubber membrane. I thought it was just kind of boilerplate.
Mm. I think so. Okay, you want to move on to roads and sidewalks? We're not really hearing anything with respect to them for this meeting, but at least we can, level set where we are with the balance and.
Yeah, so with roads and sidewalks, same thing. I just, that tracks with what we appropriated out. Once it goes
Mhm.
out, it kind of disappears into the available funds to be then applied to whatever needs to be applied. So we don't really necessarily have a project level tracking of this, but at least as the stabilization fund works, it is, that all adds up correctly.
Yeah, and the recommendation at the select board was not to increase that, so it's gonna be a level $800,000 that'll be added in fiscal 26 as part of the levy, so they felt like I think the way that Brian sort of explained it was they've kind of got this window of time where they can actually do the physical paving. They obviously have the 20-year plan. Since they share the asphalt contract with other towns, they're also sort of limited by that. So there's only I guess the way it sort of came down to there's only so many miles that they can do in the time period and sharing with other towns the same contractor. So they didn't feel like they needed to necessarily escalate it right now by that 2.5% kicker that 800, 900,000 plus the chapter, is it chapter 90 money was gonna cover them in terms of what they need to get done on an annual basis.
Good to hear.
I think paving comes in like boom and bust cycles, right? There's, because Brian always says like you want to do a whole section together. So you really, I know South Main Street, that's more than a 1 year of work that they did in 1 year, just because it was, a lot of things went into the delays for that. So there is a kind of a boom and bust cyclical nature to it.
Mhm. Okay, and the
All right.
same thing on sewer, we're not hearing anything for the special town meeting.
Yep.
Thank you, Michelle. You can probably bring that
Okay,
down.
Great.
Michelle, did you find Nick's updated numbers on the Osgood Deer Hill and the middle school, high school roofs or not?
I can look right now.
I'd just be curious. Mostly because Corey and I do have a meeting with schools tomorrow to sort of begin the liaison process, so having something in our back pocket wouldn't be a bad thing. Michelle, are these audited numbers, just so that we're clear on, or are these still estimates for the stabilization funds?
They're still estimates.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
I think we mentioned, Michelle, that we wanted to be able to access that 10-year plan, whatever the latest one is.
Yeah, it's in the OneDrive.
Yeah, I see a lot of. them
Couldn't ever figure out
I
which one it
don't know
was,
which one it
Corey,
is.
though.
Yeah, that's.
Oh,
all
yeah,
right.
good point.
Sorry, somebody's gonna have to tell me exactly where to look, because when I
Mhm.
went in, I was seeing stuff that was like,
Yeah, there's
Wait.
one from last week. Michelle, that's the one you're referring to, right?
No, so that's the older one.
Oh, okay. Never
there's-
mind.
There is one that everyone's still working on. We're pulling it all together that
hmm,
you should have within the next week or two of everyone's updated 10-year capital plan. They trickled in last week.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So we don't have those numbers that you have for Nick then. Okay, I was just,
Those haven't been updated. Those are still the numbers from the last cycle. So if you find an old 10-year plan, the numbers were updated then. And then, of course, you'd escalated slightly for this year, but
got it. Yeah, I've got their last four. Deer Hill's 1 million, Osgood's still 1 million.
is that the one at the middle high school at 3 million?
No, that's at 1.5.
Okay, that's,
This
that-
useless. Okay.
yep, that was
Well-
no good.
Well, but I mean, it gives us, if we went from 1.5 to 3, then I can do that math, or where one goes to. So,
I'll share it with the group when I have it.
all right, great.
Yeah.
So then the next thing for us, and again, you're driving 2 trucks here, Michelle, is the fire alarm replacement, and we've got that document you put in there.
I'm sorry, Corey, next on the agenda was the free cash appropriation to capital stabilization.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
Um,
Right.
which is kind of a timely topic in that if I'm doing the math right, we're appropriating $350,000 of free cash to the OPEB trust fund. And then in Article 4, for one-time costs, we're appropriating another 150,000 and change to various projects, including the airlift bags for fire. So that's a total of, 650, that's a total of like a little over $500,000. We've run free cash numbers anywhere between $1 million, north of $1 million consistently for almost a decade now. So that leaves 500,000 or so that it's undesignated fund balance. And I guess part of the reason I raise it is if you look back historically in our capital stabilization fund analysis, we've as capital budget have seen at special town meeting anywhere from 400,000 to as much as 750,000 appropriated at special town meeting. There's nothing being appropriated this year. And I just didn't know whether it was because we don't have a certified free cash number or that free cash is lower and there isn't more than $500,000, but it has been the practice very consistently, with the one exception of being fiscal 22, where in one-time expenses, we had the 750 for town hall and 250 for school facilities, which basically ate up most of the free cash flow that year. So I'm just sort of wondering if this was a plan not to do anything to capital, or is it just an artifact of not having certified free cash?
So Katie, it's the latter of the two. We don't have certified free cash yet, so Chris is being extremely conservative as to what he's allocating until he has a full understanding of the free cash number. We're hoping the balance sheet will be completed this week, and to get that free cash number certified sooner than later, and obviously before special town meeting. So that is exactly why you're not seeing a transfer to capital at this time.
Is there any discussion of putting a placeholder in the warrant for said transfer? That way we can do it when it comes up, or is it something that that money is just gonna be stuck for until annual?
I believe it's gonna be stuck until annual. I don't think there is a placeholder at this time. I can
Okay.
certainly go back to Chris and ask him. But I've not heard of a placeholder for capital at this time.
I mean, I guess I'd ask the question, about a placeholder. I would feel better if there was one, and I guess I'd feel better if there was one and there was a mechanism to vote on it prior to special town meeting. If there's no mechanism to vote on it prior to special town meeting for advisory and select board, then it's kind of a moot point, but I don't love the idea of, it's not what we usually do at annual town meeting, and so we're gonna forget about it. Just be very blunt, like,
Oh, it makes
Yeah.
makes our job harder too,
We-
right? It's
well, it
going
makes our
forward.
job harder because we've got a smaller budget that we know of upfront. And it historically has just kind of gone into this undesignated fund balance, and become a little bit of a slush fund for one-time expenses the following year. And I don't love the optics of not continuing the trend of investing in capital budget.
So I'll reach out to Chris in the morning and see if there's something we can do to get a placeholder on the warrant.
If we get a
before it's
placeholder,
closed.
yeah, placeholder for 100,000 or whatever it is, but, and then revise it and we can vote it, the week before or right before. I mean, obviously he wants to go for everybody else too, but having a revised number in there that's up, I don't think sends a bad message at all to the town. So,
Okay.
Are there any tea leaves that you can speak of, Michelle, about certified free cash, or is it still a black box? Sworn to secrecy?
No, I don't have any information.
from the money tree, leaves from the money tree.
There are no, there are no secrets. I just don't have any information to provide.
Oh, should you have such power?
Not in a recorded meeting, that's for sure.
Yeah, okay.
All
All
right,
right.
we good for the
Thank
next?
you for indulging me, because I do feel like it will make it harder for us to be generous if we don't have that addition to the capital stabilization.
No doubt, that would be true. So do we have Nick available, or who's gonna present on the fire alarm request? Or are we just gonna talk about it with nobody?
Yeah, so I don't think there's anyone here to present. I think all the information Nick provided a couple
Mhm.
weeks ago was all the information. I did upload to the OneDrive what the engineer provided to this point.
Mhm.
So
The only question was for me on that was, I think in the engineering report, it was a 1.4 number and he's at he's higher. Is it just is that a roundup, or was there some escalation that happened, change of scope that caused the increase in the estimate?
I believe that was just a bit of contingency to add.
Okay.
So Francine, do you want to see anything on the screen? Do you want to see
Do you mind sharing it and going to page
project
3?
document?
Yeah.
One question I have, I'm struggling with, and my apologies, so some folks might have to remind me, I appreciate it. I'm looking at that file, and I think you were just in it, Corey, because it looked like I saw your cursor on it when you
Oh,
were
yeah.
talking about the roof replacements.
Yep.
That file, which is what I'm also looking at there, and I realize it's dated, and I don't know how dated it is, but not that I can't tell that there was any indication that the fire alarms needed to be replaced. So I don't know how old this file is. There is a dollar amount, I think it was, I don't know if it was for 2026, maybe it was 2025, of 100,000 and some change, not the $1.2 million, $1.4 million price tag now. So I'm I guess, and I'm sorry I missed the first few meetings again. I'm struggling how, I feel like to me, this came out of nowhere, this, um.
So we
this
did,
item.
so the 100, whatever it was, this came up at the last cycle where we funded the feasibility study. Because the issue was that the fire alarm system, as I recall, and Susan, to correct me if I got something wrong here, of course, is that basically we can't get replacement parts for what we have. And
Mhm.
at a certain point, if a pull down something, if something is broken, you can't use the building at all anymore.
I
So what
see.
we funded at special town meeting was basically a study that says, okay, should we update what we have, or is it better for just to run a parallel system, which may be more expensive, but also means the building doesn't go down and you're not going to run into any unexpected issues while trying to retrofit the existing system. So Nick came back to us with the results of that study, which we had funded it annual, with this document saying the conclusion was that running a new system in parallel would be not that much more expensive and operationally a lot safer. So that's where you weren't here for the initial request, but it is the chapter 2 of the chapter 1 that we paid for at annual.
That was that 100,000 or
Correct.
something like that, I
Yeah,
think, for
135 or
feasibility,
whatever
yeah.
it was. Correct. Yeah,
150,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was I don't want to say expected, but we saw this coming. It did come in over, I think when we were talking about it, was in the low 1.2 range.
Okay.
Like anything.
And then to Katie's point, I guess my only other question, just to try to connect the dots here, and I think this is to Katie's point, the cost of that then really eats most of the stabilization fund, but would be just enough left. And I know they need to get an updated estimate and all for the roof replacement at Osgood, which is in that same document.
Right.
That I'm referring to, that I think you guys had pulled up too. But that means all of these other things that, again, they had thought they might be able to do, they're not going to be able to do because they don't have money to do it, right? I mean, these two projects are really that's it, until it gets refunded again, the stabilization fund.
And actually, go
Well,
ahead, Katie.
So they've got a $3 million, they had a $3 million balance. We
Mhm.
appropriated 150 for the engineering study for the fire alarm and $300,000 for the Deer Hill tile. That left them with 2.5 and change. We gave them $15,000 for the Osgood roof design, and if we approve the 1.43 million for the fire alarm, that'll leave them with $1.1 million for
The roof.
balance post
Okay.
special town meeting.
Mhm.
What the select board just did was approve for next year's tax levy for fiscal 26's tax levy, there'll be the addition to that school stabilization of another 1.537. So starting, assuming that we don't take anything else out, we've got 1.1 post special town meeting in December. We'll have another 1.5 million come in as of, call it June 2025.
Mhm.
That'll leave us with a balance of $2.6 million, which will definitely cover Osgood roof, even if it's doubled from the $1 million. We also don't know what the grant funding we'll get from MASBA. So
Mhm.
we probably won't have to foot the full bill as a
Mhm.
result of that. When I had conversations on school committee, the funding for roofs at the time was anywhere between 40 to 60% of the total bill.
I see.
So I don't
I don't think it's that high anymore. Right.
but it may not be that high anymore, because they've sort of changed with this accelerated, but it won't be a total, we won't have to foot the total bill.
Okay.
So,
'Cause-
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Where I'm going with this is some of these other items that were supposed to be coming out of the ongoing, like the bus lease and the Chromebooks and things like that, while not big ticket items. I thought the intent was those would also be coming out of the stabilization fund, but these two things we mentioned are really big ticket items. And just to make sure that there's money left to cover these ongoing and reoccurring costs too. Albeit smaller, but still required.
Well, they're not all contemplated to be part of the stabilization fund. Some of them are still going to be part of the capital.
Okay, all right, that's, okay, all right, then I misunderstood that, okay.
Well, but also Francine, I think this is, I don't think you're at the meeting, but on this issue, we actually kind of punted it back to school committee. Because to your point, there are so many big projects and we wanted a clear indication of what priority one was, right? And we understood this, that fire alarms was priority one, and now we're going to understand that Osgood is, you know, the next priority, but we need an official, there are so many projects out there and there's only so much funding, we need an official chain of yes, this is what we're doing next. And
Mhm.
so we talked to the schools about next time being, not next time, but this time and going forward, being very clear on what the priority project is for this cycle.
Mhm.
And that way we can move forward, because to your point, there's just so much there. We need to have some sort of understanding of what the rubric is and what comes next.
And Corey, you guys are meeting with them tomorrow?
Yeah.
So we'll start to get some clarification on that.
Yeah, I warned Katie, I'm working the polls tomorrow morning, so I'm gonna show up a shell of myself, so we'll see.
Thank you for that, thank you all.
Yeah. Michelle, I guess I found the December memo from last year super helpful because it sort of summarized the current conditions. The technical specs, I think, without being able to talk to with either Nagel Engineering or facilities, it's sort of hard for me to parse through like a lot of the technical aspects. But I guess my bigger question was, when I was reading that section at the end of the bid document that sort of described what they were bidding on in terms of the new fire alarm system, my big question was sort of like, how is this better or different than the existing fire alarm system? I just, from all the technical detail, you couldn't really tell what bells and whistles we were adding on, or whether it was sort of replacement of existing, but obviously technologically not obsolete anymore.
Right, and I think you just hit the nail on the head. I don't think there's any bells or whistles or we're doing anything different. I think we're replacing the system because the system we have in place now is obsolete. I think it's just an in-kind replacement. Of course, they need some different engineering because it's not the same system. But I don't think we're going for anything extravagant, anything with any bells or whistles. We may have to be adding some additional alarms just because of current code. But other than that, I think it's pretty standard as to what we have today.
Right, and Nick said that it had the foundation to be built on to add additional capabilities to the system, whereas our current system has no capability to have anything added to it.
It's a crumbling foundation.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only other thing that just jumped out to me, and maybe this is standard, is you might know this, Michelle, but I noticed that the warranty was only for 1 year. I assume that there's additional warranties from the underlying manufacturers that we'd be able to rely on. This is just the 1-year warranty for the work done by the contractor, correct?
Correct. So typically we do get a warranty from the manufacturers. Those are anywhere from 12 to 24 months. And then we do get an additional year from the contractor. So we essentially have a 3-year warranty on most work done in
Okay.
town.
Okay. Yeah, it felt really short. So that's helpful. So we will get more from the actual manufacturer.
We'll test it a lot before we accept, right?
Yes. And there was a description of testing before. Yeah.
But yeah, the warranty part that's in our bid requirement, right? It's not, yeah, so I mean, it technically speaking, a contractor could come in and warranty it for longer, but that's all we're demanding. And that's just typically what it is for this kind of stuff, right, Michelle? Yeah, okay.
Any reason why I stated November 20th instead of November 4th, or did you guys notice that?
Because that's the day the bid's actually gonna go out. We're gonna be able to send that out November
okay.
20th to the vendors.
Okay.
Starts that clock,
I
30
see.
days.
30 day.
Well, I thought the bids were gonna have to be back on December 6th, actually. Cause I don't even know if it's 30 days.
So we've started all the advertising requirements ahead of
Okay.
time. And then the bid will actually hit the street on the 20th and be due on the 6th.
Okay. All right.
Oh, the bids have to be in, but they have to be good for 30 days. Got it. Okay. Right. So we can chew through them and decide. Understood.
Yep.
The ins and outs of bidding. How exciting.
Yeah,
Yes.
Procurement.
Procurement,
Previous
right?
life for you, Michelle.
very exciting gig.
You know, we'll stop asking you to count days now. I'm sorry about that.
So
I'm good on
people feel
this
ready to
myself.
vote?
Yeah, at this point. Everybody else okay if I make a motion?
I'm good.
All right, then I move that we recommend a town meeting appropriating lost the thing here. 1 point, what was it?
1.43.
3.
$1.43 million out of the school stabilization fund for the purposes of the Cohasset Middle High School fire alarm.
A second?
Okay, roll call vote. Chris,
Chris Peisch, yes.
Francine,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Katie,
Kitty Dugan, aye.
Corey,
Corey Evans, aye.
Susan Franklin, aye. Deliberate and vote all outstanding capital requests.
Do we have anything left,
Don't
Michelle?
have anything left because the fire department one didn't come back, right?
Correct.
Well, it came back in Article 4.
Right.
Right, but it didn't come back to
It
us.
didn't come back to us.
Right.
A little too cheap and a different pot of money, so we're good.
Yeah. I had one question, just on the patrol rifles in terms of, it's listed that it's coming out of capital stabilization. And I guess that's true, but it's a reappropriation, from the SUV. I don't know if that's what gets covered in the motion or how that gets handled.
So essentially, he's gonna turn back the money and so you're appropriating the money, but he's turning back
The other money,
the
Right.
other money.
or we just didn't spend it. Right, we
Okay.
didn't spend it before, it's locked up somewhere
Right,
else, so
right.
we're appropriating.
Okay, so he's gonna turn back and then we're reappropriating from, and it'll get put in, okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, because you see, like I was looking at the motions of these spends, it says that they can be less if the item comes in less, but you can't not spend the money on what it was appropriated for. So we have to, since it came in at less money, that money's locked up. So we have to reappropriate it because chief isn't allowed to use it on a different project or a different thing. So
Yeah.
Okay, then, are we ready to move on to the discussion about what happened at the RTF?
how much money we're going to be needing for that? Speaking of appropriating free cash for unexpected things.
Yeah, so everyone knows, we had that fire at the RTF last week. We've been moving very quickly to try to put it back together so we can service the residents again. It was wonderful that Situate allowed us to dispose of our trash there this weekend. I hope everyone had a good experience. It seems like they thought it went well.
We're all a
have-
little jealous.
Well, so you have the power to make ours better. So we lost, I think we believe it's 6 structures that we lost, all on the side from the cardboard compression station all the way to the building, which held the office and essentially acted as a garage as well for the loader. We're actively working with insurance to figure out, what we're insured for, what we're not, what can be replaced, what can't be. But I think the reason I wanted to talk about this is in the spring, I think you're gonna have requests from the DPW folks to see if we can reimagine the RTF, since we have a jumping off point now to reimagine a portion of it due to the fire. Maybe it's best now to continue on and really modernize the operation, so our folks won't be jealous when they go places like Situate or Hingham or somewhere else. But it really would just be running a more efficient operation, not necessarily the envy of all the other towns. Obviously, our footprint is a lot smaller, so there's only so much we can do there. And I think the intent would just be to put everything back together in a more efficient manner for the community. So I just wanted to give you the heads up that likely in the spring, you're going to see several requests come forward. Obviously, you know, with the insurance, we'll bring most requests, but not all. But that's also a question I have. If it's a capital item, a lot of these items have already been voted on, and they're just being replaced. But if we're talking about new structures and such, I'm assuming that capital would like to hear the entire plan, whether it's paid for with insurance or not. It still meets the capital threshold. And I think the more involved all of the committees are in reimagining the RTF, it would probably be very successful.
I will
So how is
admit,
that reimagining going to happen? Is there just sort of ad hoc committee discussions or?
Nope. So
Or-
prior to this happening, we had a consultant on board because we wanted to review the RTF, review how we were doing things, see if there was a way to do things better, more efficiently. Because as you know, it's been very difficult to get manpower up there. It seems like we're always down a staff member or two.
Correct.
So we're really trying to look at the operation and seeing, you know, are there things that can be automated? So we can have a body do something else up there versus stand there, essentially and
Crashing
Yeah.
glass.
or you're moving cardboard 3 feet.
moving
right?
cardboard, exactly. Do we need a body standing there moving cardboard all the time when we could make a more efficient operation? And so we had a consultant work on that. He's providing us a preliminary blueprint of what the RTF could look like, and he's attaching some costs to it. So I just wanted to let you know that I will be bringing those things forward along with Brian Joyce as they come in.
I like the idea of reimagining the RTF in other towns. Like if everyone else has these great facilities, let's just, you know, do a contract and we can all, half the town can go to Hingham, half the town can go to Situate, and we're done. But also any discussion about, obviously I know that the fees we collect with the stickers don't pay for the facility. You know, I don't, not necessarily campaigning for raising fees on people, but at the same time, I don't love hidden costs, right? So we're going to hide the operation of the RTF in the capital budget, and we're going to hide the operation, all these different things, and that obviously, you know, disadvantages some taxpayers versus others, and kind of takes up money. So if there's a discussion about, that's going to be something on my radar as we go through this.
I guess, I mean, the way I was looking at it was if our purview is items that have a useful life of greater than X years. And so if we're talking about structures or we're talking about major machinery or front loaders, those are things that we have purview over, which will obviously, some of it will be replaced by insurance money. Some of it could come from capital stabilization in terms of how big our vision is, or how much money we get from insurance. So that's from where I sit, it's about the major investments we're making that have a useful life of greater than 10 or 15 years or whatever it says. That's what I'm focused on.
So for instance, the loader, everyone just approved that 2 years ago. We just took possession of it. So that's not something I'm going to bring forward unless you want to hear it all over again. We're just going to replace in kind, because it's already been approved. But I agree, if we're talking about additional mechanics and equipment, that'll certainly come before the committee, whether we're asking for you to pay for it or not.
Yeah, and I would assume that like replacing, I mean, we had 6 structures, but that's just sort of an artifact of like we built it up over time, like anything in New England, it became like this rambling set of like outbuildings. If you were re-envisioning it, my guess is you wouldn't have 6 separate structures that are sort of,
No,
you'd have one or.
glorified sheds.
One
Yeah,
would collaborate.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I would hope that we'd be involved in those conversations about like, if we go from 6 to 1 or 6 to 2, that's whether it's insurance money or not, that's a conversation in terms of like what the community is doing in terms of investing in its capital.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And that was the reason to put this on the agenda tonight, is to talk about what your expectations are, what you'd like to see, and how involved you want to be. So it sounds like involved. Let's bring it to you. Let's get involved. Who is the liaison again to the DPW? Is it
I-
Ralph and?
It's Ralph and myself. I think
Okay.
Ralph and I did facilities in DPW. I told him I would ride shotgun since he's had years of experience.
Great.
That, and I mean, all the more reason to, I mean, if we're gonna have to spend some money in the spring around the RTF, all the more reason to have an appropriation in the Article 3 to the
Yep.
stabilization fund. So, I mean, if you want to tie the two together, we'd love to be in a position to be supportive of things like this. So,
Yes.
Great. I will ask Chris about that in the morning.
Will you have final resolution from the insurance company by the time we need it, or by the time you need it, in order to present what additional monies might be needed and have it all done in time for our annual town meeting?
Francine, that is a great question.
Right.
So just when I think we're moving very quickly, right, we stall. But you know, we're moving as quickly as we can. We of course don't want to miss anything or miss any opportunities. So we are meeting as a group. So it's Brian, Joyce, the DPW folks, myself, and John Hallen, to make sure what we're doing properly, and we're checking all the boxes, dotting all the i's, crossing all the t's, because you know, as terrible as this was, it really does open up an opportunity for us to look at things differently. So we're making sure we take advantage of that.
well, I guess it's lucky that you did have some of the visioning work done or already in process.
Fair point.
Because like that would have been, that I'm not sure you would have had enough time to catch up on. Changing insurance companies is gonna be enough of a job, as Francine pointed out.
Right.
Um,
Or get some Boy Scouts to build some more sheds.
oh my God.
Vince is on advisory now, so he's got an inside line.
Corey, I didn't hear that. Like there'll be an Eagle project.
I don't know, that
Absolutely.
last Boy Scout can bucket thing, or the big box full of cans. I like the other setup better.
You don't like the bees? The family of bees that are living in the
You see the
can?
Boy Scouts and their parents just shoveling those cans out of the big box and just to bring them inside to sort them, which is what they're doing in the first place. But no. All right. All right, items not reasonably known within 48 hours. We don't have any of those.
Awesome.
So I think we've accomplished our special town meeting duties, correct? Except if we have to circle back and on anything, but it sounds like we got those votes done.
Yes, we did.
And you'll be seeing some annual votes soon. I've collected a lot of the data. I have to upload the spreadsheets, but as soon as that's available, I'll let you know, and then we can start scheduling meetings to get ahead of it for annual.
One thing that I would, before we sort of jump into annual town meeting appropriations, I would love to look at that 10-year capital plan as sort of a standalone meeting, as sort of a high level view before we jump into appropriating money. The other thing that I was curious to look at, and I know that Sam used to do this long time ago, was, you know, he had a list of all the open appropriations and what the balance was against them, so that we could kind of figure out if the appropriation was 5 years old and there was a balance of $5,000, like, let's pull it back. It was sort of the change in the couch exercise, and it adds up to, $100,000 pretty quickly. And I saw that in the spreadsheet that Don circulated, it looked like last year there was like $111,000 that was done that way. So for me, that would be sort of a thing that we'd want to do at the beginning of the process, is figure out what we could pull from old appropriations before we got started with new appropriations.
Sure, and I can upload that document by the end of the week.
Okay.
To show you where we are, and then we can also reach out to all the department heads and let them know that they do have money. If they're not going to use it, we need to turn it back.
Yeah.
Mhm. Great.
Yeah, so in terms of a next agenda at some point, it was sort of looking at that, and then it was looking at the 10-year capital plan were sort of two things that were on my radar screen.
Anything else?
When do you think the latest version of the 10-year plan will be pretty populated?
I'm going to say next week.
Next week? We could have both those items.
Yep.
pretty quickly then.
Next Monday is Veterans Day, so I don't think we could meet on that.
Meet the following Monday?
On the 18th. That works better for me. Next week is kind of busy.
Do we want to push it one more week just to give more time for free cash or anything like that? The 25th? That's the week. No, let's not do anything Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, I
Never
was
mind.
about to say, like,
Yeah,
please.
bad idea.
I'm hoping, Corey, by the 18th, we may have an idea of what the free cash certification may look like.
Okay.
If we get the balance sheet tomorrow. we might
Gotcha.
be Okay,
We just got to turn around to the,
yeah, to the DOR.
All right, then, let's go for the 18th unless anyone else has an issue with the 18th, Francine or Chris?
No, I'm fine with that.
I'm going to be traveling for work. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to make a meeting that evening, but it
Well,
depends. Yeah,
Let's
it
get
depends on
our
how the work
technical
day goes.
sketch- Yeah, let's get your technical situation straightened out, so maybe you can at least look at the documents that will be
Okay.
available for the meeting, and if you have any thoughts on them, you could share
So
them
we
with-
just have to get you access, Francine, to the new drive? The new
Mm,
data on the drive?
Maybe because I can get on it, but everything I can see so far is like really from last cycle. So I'll play around with it some more. Maybe I'm just missing it, but
It's the new folder, doesn't have her as a member.
it doesn't look like I have access.
Okay.
I'll look again and maybe I can reach out to you, Michelle, or you can point me to
Yep.
where I
And
need
Chris
to
is
go.
having a similar issue still.
Okay.
All right, that'd be great.
Francine, I'm gonna email you right now the link to
A new
current
folder.
folder. Yeah,
Okay,
you should have it in
alright.
1 second.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I had just one small question around how you guys handle minutes. Do you guys do them on mass at some later date, or do you try and weave in approval of a couple sets of minutes as you go through the year?
Yes, we're trying to figure out what we're doing basically. So
So typically Leontina, she does a batch of minutes at a sitting, so she'll alert me when the minutes are completed. I will send them off to Susan and Corey. They can share them with the group, but typically she'll do 3 meetings at a time, and then you can approve 3 meetings at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe meetings, minutes from the meeting on the 18th, if there's a batch available.
Yeah.
Yep.
You should add
That'd
that
be-
to the agenda.
I hate to get behind because it really gets. I spent like the first 6 months on school committee catching up on like minutes for like honestly 2 years because Paul Onyebani and Gina Stino weren't agreeing on how to revise.
We did the capital budget did Votorama last year too, so
Did
we,
you do Votorama?
we've lived that recently, yeah, so we're good.
I mean, it's fun, but like, we can avoid it.
I think I just got a friendly reminder too from someone at town hall about minutes, keeping minutes. Is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah, the clerk's office. sent
Yeah.
it.
That's-
Yeah.
That's sort of what,
Everybody
I
knows.
saw the same thing, Francie, and I'm like, do we want to be that committee?
That just brings up a
Oh.
good point that I haven't looked at yet. So you did have your Votorama last year, where you voted everything.
Yeah,
Did those minutes ever make it from your vote to the clerk? Do we know if Brian ever sent them in?
Oh, good lord.
Because if not, I'll just start sending them in. Obviously not tomorrow, but after the election, after this week, I'll send the whole batch of them in.
I don't know that he did, but wouldn't they be attached? Wouldn't they be attached already to the prior meetings?
Yeah,
be on your-
usually if you went
I
back
have
into the
looked.
old meetings, if they're there, they're attached.
yeah, I don't know if Brian actually sent them to Beth and Lisa.
Okay, I will send them after tomorrow. I'll just send them all.
And Michelle, did our meeting get corrected in the calendar? Because like today, it seemed like I thought I was supposed to for 4:44 on the website. Did I just? No, okay, fine.
Wait,
It's
what
showing
happened?
correctly now, but yeah, this afternoon when I was looking up the agenda, it showed us at like it said time 4:44 for our meeting
It does
time.
say that.
It does. It does still?
Hmm.
Well, because I'm on it now. It says 7 o'clock right now.
Actually, all the times are messed up.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think that's when it was posted though, right? Because when you go into the form itself, it says Monday, November 4th at 7 PM.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
that's
it says
probably when
posted.
it was
Yeah.
posted on October 30th at 4:44.
You're totally right. And just on the phone, it looks differently. Thanks,
Oh, okay.
Francine. Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks, yeah. Okay. I'm just an idiot.
Yes,
I
it
just
always-
thought, are we having an illegal meeting? 'Cause
No,
I-
my brain is just not functioning today, so apologies.
Okay. Okay,
Motion to adjourn? I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, roll call. Chris,
Chris Fleisch, aye.
Francine,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Katie Dugan,
Katie Dugan, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Susan Franklin, I. Okay, the time is 8:14.
Thank you all.
All right.
Everyone have a
Thank you.
wonderful evening.
bye.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.